Thank you for joining us. This is How Can Reshaping Our Work with Men Become the Cure? Reimagining of Fatherhood, Manhood, and Masculinity. On the other side of the intersecting epidemics of COVID-19, systemic violence, and gender violence. So it's time to do a very quick introduction of our speaker. We're proud to have Quentin Walcott, an anti-violence activist and educator specializing in engaging men and boys and ending gender-based violence. He's the co-executive director of Connect, a New York City nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing interpersonal violence. Welcome, Q. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing so that you can share yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Firstly, I'd like to thank just the team, the behind-the-scenes team, working with me to make this workshop possible. So thank you all. And also, thank you to all the participants for joining into this conversation, really. If you know me, if you know the work at Connect, we train and we workshop conversational style. And we're going to kind of continue with that thread to kind of answer this question about how can reshaping our work with men become the cure? And that is a big question. And when I developed a synopsis for this workshop, and read it, a couple of weeks later, I was like, wow, what was I trying? What was I intending to kind of answer and offer? But what I want to do is hear from you first with a couple of questions, polling questions that I have, just to kind of get an idea of what you're doing, why you joined this workshop, and what type of work that you're doing and what type of work is possible. So my question to you is what is your work with men? Are you directly working with men right now? Are you thinking about engaging this in your personally or within your organization? Or are you just kind of curious about this topic?
Looks like we have a question in the chat asking men as allies.
In general, it's an open question. Okay, great. Okay. So as the numbers are coming in, it seems that mostly people are working with men in some capacity. And then I think number two would be folks are curious about this topic. And I think that's extremely important. And those are the people that we're really trying to reach when we think about the idea of working with men and how that work is driven and who does it cater to. Okay. So the overwhelming numbers are, we can share this with folks. Okay. So the question I have for you now is, where are you calling from right now? What part of the country or part of the world are you calling in from? And I'm calling in from New York City. I'm in the Upper West Side right now. And Connect's work is located in Harlem, New York. And we're a citywide organization and they do work nationally and internationally as well. So let me know where you're calling in from. Okay, California, Maryland, Wisconsin, Palm Springs, West Virginia, Beaumont, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Greenville, South Carolina, great. Lexington, Florida, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Brooklyn and Harlem. What's up, Darrell? Los Angeles, Honolulu, great. Maui, Raleigh, North Carolina, Connecticut, great. Peoria, Kentucky, a lot going on in Kentucky right now. You all are representing a lot of places throughout the country there where there's uprisings happening. So salute to all of you who are on the front lines, looking for pushing towards systemic change. Okay, great. So now to jump into the conversation now, and to answer this question, I'm going to use the example of Connect's men's work. And we do a lot of various different types of work, groups, workshops, and trainings and roundtables. But I want to really focus in on the roundtable as an example of how the work around engaging men and boys, highlighting that as being crucial to really stemming the tide and preventing violence and interrupting cycles of violence. Because if you really dig deep in terms of the multiple intersecting forms of violence, and when we look at not just those who are harmed by it, because a lot of times that's where we land on, the victims, the survivors, those who are harmed by whatever particular type of violence, and the work begins there. But in order to really to prevent it or to interrupt these cycles, we must look at the agents, those and the root causes of violence. And if you dig the surface around intimate partner violence, interpersonal violence, community violence, military, police, all the different forms of violence that we're talking about, if you scratch the surface, there's typically a man or a group of men making decisions about violence and how to perpetrate it, who's targeted by it. So I think that the work must include this idea of men and boys and examining, male privilege, male entitlement, male expectations, and just kind of our position in the world, and also looking at, male supremacy and the intersecting issues around white supremacy. So it's important that we look at those things holistically, and that we're not single narratives. We're not, dealing with one issue, and men are not either. So it's important that we look at that. So what we've done at Connect, our monthly New York City Men's Roundtable was something that happened once a month. And it's been going on for about 11 years or so, maybe 11, 12 years consistently. And what happened, through COVID back in late March, when New York State was on pause, basically shut down because of the COVID virus. And as many of you know, the COVID virus in New York City was pretty devastating for quite a while. There's, up to 800, 900 people died each day, and thousands of people were infected each individual day. So it was really tense here in New York. And then to highlight that, the piece around this pandemic was that the pandemic that has probably been impacting us really globally, particularly here in North America, since the transatlantic slave trade has been, slavery and systemic racism and racism. So as a result of, the situation that we were in, we tried to be strategic as possible and also meet the need. And, with the idea of being, mandated to be in your household meant many different things for families, for survivors of violence, for children, and even for the men being in home as well. A totally new dynamic was created because many of these men were not typically at home, either working or outside of the home, or not together in a relationship with the woman and the mom and the children. So for the first time in quite a while, it was like putting people together that normally weren't together for various reasons. Might have been issues around violence or unhealthy relationships, unhealthy family dynamics. So which kind of really instituted I think throughout the country and really around the world, and I'm not going to bog you down with statistics today. I'm just going to talk to the ideas around engaging men and boys and why this work is important. So I won't inundate you with statistics. But the reality is that these households where people kind of forced to be together due to the circumstances of COVID really kind of created a situation where interpersonal violence was on the rise, domestic violence was on the rise, violence in relationships, child abuse, sexual violence, and child sexual abuse was on the rise, despite if the numbers recognize that in terms of phone calls that were made. Because if you have the person who's doing harm to you inside the household, you're less likely in a position to call for help or services, particularly systemic services. So what we did with the Men's Roundtable to meet the need of our entire equation when we do our work is holistically, and part of what holistically means for us is all those involved around the violence. That means those who do harm, those who are receiving the violence, and the witnesses as well. So what we did is we stepped up and really quadrupled the services that we give overall to Connect, but in particular to the Men's Roundtable. Something that was offered once a month was now being offered 2 times a week since late March. And we literally have done over 40 men's roundtables over the last 6 months. And in addition to that, the work that we do as well with community partners is we did another set of roundtables and groups and conversations for those who are on the front lines of violence in the communities, those that are really dealing with other intersecting issues around gun violence. And as you may have heard, gun violence in communities today in New York City, in Chicago, and different places around the world are at all-time levels. And I think and COVID contributes to that, but ultimately, systemic racism is one of the root causes around that in communities and in cities around the country. So we have to kind of look at that. So a lot of our work was to really be in a position to help those who are directly on the front line in dealing with the issues, other forms of violence that intersect with interpersonal violence and other forms of violence that we may be dealing with every day. And sometimes we don't make those connections because many of the root causes of violence around intimate partner violence are the same things around gun violence and community violence. So we have to make those connections. And that's the work we were doing. So we worked with folks here in New York called the Crisis Management System, those who are on the front lines preventing gun violence. And we're in a unique position because of the situations around systemic violence here in New York and under COVID circumstances where they were out there on the front lines, making sure that community was safe and really, and unfortunately, doing their job, the typical everyday job, and then going beyond by working in communities to really prevent systems from coming into the communities and harming people based on systemic violence. Because many communities here in New York that are communities of color, Black, Latino, were being really impacted by police in the name of COVID mitigation and being attacked in a lot of circumstances in the name of wearing a mask and social distancing, when other communities, white communities in New York City, were treated differently, very differently, as they are around police violence as well. And they were actually giving PPE equipment and talked to and treated respectfully, but that was not the case in Black and brown communities. So what we did, we thought it was important to work with them because they're dealing with a lot of stress and trauma just in the nature of being exposed in multiple ways to COVID and other forms of violence as well. So for us, it was important to do that work. And year round, we do work with Spanish-speaking men, colleague Marlon Walker on the Connect staff, who coordinates our men's work and programs, does work with Spanish-speaking men who are undocumented or documented, but are experiencing different realities than other men in the United States experience based on their language access and based on the threats of deportation due to their citizenship status. So that creates a whole nother level and depth to the needs for working with men, in particular around sexual violence and domestic violence. So we've done that work, and the roundtable has been a way that we've kind of really challenged the status quo and really looked at accountability with compassion with men. So the men's roundtable dealing with multiple issues of the day and the time, really in the moment of what was happening. Where's the sound on this? I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty with the sound here. Well, anyway, this was a great little short clip to kind of encapsulate all the different topics that we've been dealing with through the men's roundtable. It was being played to the backdrop of Marvin Gaye's "In the City Blues" Make Me Wanna Holler. So just imagine that in your mind.
Q, we do have someone with the raised hand. I don't know if you have time to take a question really quickly.
Just kind of figure out my sound here. Excuse me one moment.
Okay. I'm thinking you may need to share computer audio at the top of the screen settings.
Screening tools and questions that you might consider using as part of that screening process in this year to get at some of these issues that might be impacting your students and your families in a way that's different from what you may have been screening for in the past.
There's a button that needs to be pushed back on the share screen at the bottom left-hand side. It says share computer sound.
Share computer sound.
Three dots icon in the presentation setting.
Okay. Stop recording. Sometimes I don't see that on my end. I see. I'm so sorry. Let's give one second to catch up.
You have to stop sharing first, and then you'll see the checkbox.
Saying that. You said it's on the bottom with the share screen, on the share screen? Very top of the screen.
You're gonna share, you're gonna open, and when you're gonna put share, you're gonna see it, and it's gonna have like a little tiny square in the in the screen sharing, and it's gonna say share screen and share screen with audio.
Oh yes, I see it. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll catch up, no worries. Okay, so the question is, why are we doing this work and why is this work with men important? And I think in this time with all these multiple and competing pandemics, this young man, Keedron Bryant, had this viral short video of him singing the song, I Just Want to Live. It's really like a good framework in telling him why we're doing this work in this moment. So I just want to play this really quickly.
I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
So I think this young gentleman speaks to the very heart and nature of why this work with men and boys is so important. And we have to listen to the young people because they are our leaders now. And we have to listen to them. We have to take leadership from them. We have to ally with them in order to really transform the world that we're living in now, transform violence in the home, transform violence in our communities, and just transform state-sanctioned violence as well. So I think that this young piece, and we showed it at one of the roundtables, and it really was an emotional piece that really brought many of us to tears because it really framed our work moving forward in this moment. So young people are the reason why ultimately we need to do this. We need to get our stuff together. We need to do our work internally. We need to heal. We need to deal with our trauma. We need to be whole and we need to be well to position them and be in the best place possible. So these are the reasons why we do this work. In this question here, I don't know if we have this set up as a quick question for the audience. But how are you feeling, right? That is the question. I think that's heavy on people's minds, and we're not addressing it enough. Men are not even thinking about answering this question. A lot of that has to do with how we're built, how we're socialized to be men, how we kind of suppress our feelings and emotions. But these are the questions I want you all to ask yourselves just right now in this moment, and then let me know how you're feeling in the chat if it's not already set up as a question for us. We're 6 months into COVID-19. We're, almost 450 years into slavery and systemic racism, and probably longer than that. With all the multiple issues that are going on right now, just straight up, like, how are you feeling? And if you could describe this in a few words for us, the feeling, the emotion, and these things really set up, you don't have to answer this part right now, but like, how's your life changed? How has your work changed? And if it has changed, in what way? And with all that is going on, just emotionally, how's your spirit impacted by this moment? So if folks can just type in the chat and let me know, how are you feeling in this moment? Overwhelmed, tired, overwhelmed, heartbroken, angry, heavy, stressed, frustrated and heartbroken, frightened, concerned, exhausted, absolutely ready for change. The amount of distractions on a single day, actually, the amount of distractions that we have has made, giving titles and themes to these men's roundtables very difficult because there's so many competing issues. But even still, folks are feeling motivated, connected. Right now, more than ever, we've been connected to our families and our friends and our loved ones. Even if it's been difficult and the relationship has been difficult, folks have been connecting with their family members and figuring out ways of staying engaged in this moment, but reaching out nevertheless. Some people are feeling desperate, disconnected, very isolated from family. In isolation, many of our cultures, the idea of letting an elder be on their own by themselves is a very difficult thing for me as well. I had my mom who was, 70 and has some health disparities, and, leaving her by herself physically was something very, very difficult for me to do. And I think about that and I regret it, every day, being put in that position to isolate, family from their loved ones, especially in this time of need. So folks are feeling informed, numb at times. I hear you worried about others, exhausted, some informed. And that's a good question. Informed, like, what ways are we being informed in this moment? It's a lot of misinformation from the media, from the government, and what have you. And from Julie Thompson, in the way of competing pandemics, so many people needing guidance and support, work with survivors, and I'll change that to folks who do harm, exhausted, as a black mother of men. I believe I'm lifted by white friends and have been open to the discussion of racism. Yeah, anti-racism, you can barely buy a book now on that topic and subject. So it's definitely, a moment that we need to be, engrossed in that, but that needs to be year round, outside of a pandemic, outside of an incident of state violence. All right, great. Thank you very much. So my question to you all is, how difficult do you think it is for men who are really socialized not to be communicative in this way? And also, a lot of times it's not encouraged. And it might be about, the circles that we're in, the groups of men that we're in. How difficult do you think this is for men to answer that question? How are you feeling? And the roundtables that we offer, as you kind of fill out this poll, every roundtable begins with that. Before we jump into what needs to happen, this is what we need to do, this is what's going on. That's kind of our default, particularly as men, to really kind of solve the issue rather than going deeper in addressing our emotions and our feelings in these times. So the majority of you so far is thinking that it's extremely difficult to not at all. What's coming in second is that it's definitely a struggle. And about 1% feel that it's very easy to do. So that's telling in itself. All right, I'll stop the poll at that point. Right, so about over 50% felt that it was extremely difficult. The next, about 24% felt that it was difficult to do. And 3%, oh wait, we're going. And 1% felt that it was very easy. And I think that is pretty accurate. But I would say more that it was a struggle because really did not allow the conversation to move on until we really prodded about how people are feeling, how they feel individually as a man, as a father, as a parent, as someone in a relationship, as a leader, to really spend some time and focusing on that. In the beginning, maybe first 7 or so roundtables, folks found ways to really divert from answering that question, but we really did not go on, and it got to a point where the other men in the group would either model the idea of, how we're feeling for the other men. And that became, the crux and the reputation that we've built over the last several months, that it's a place where you can really be vulnerable, looking at vulnerability as a strength. So these are all things that we must push, particularly men and male-identified folks, to be more, to really tap into their feelings and, their emotions in this moment. Because what it really does, it provides you with some strength and some something to build on and some focus and drive to understand where you are right now so you can be in a better position to help other people. So, and the feelings that come up with the men's roundtable participants are these, the things that you all mentioned yourselves: this anxiety, frustration, fear, this lack of hope. Some did feel a sense of hopefulness as well, because that's the reality, that we can hold anxieties and fear and desperation and overwhelming with hope at the same time. We're multiple narrative people. We experience different things, and parts of our lives are not impacted by everything. So these are the things that came up. I wanted to highlight anxiety, and that's connected to the sense of a lack of control, because men are kind of socialized to be in control. Men are socialized to have the answers, or definitely not show that you don't have the answers, or show weakness or vulnerability. So that's why even asking this question and spending time on how are you feeling was important. And I just want to kind of highlight control, right? Because when we're talking about any power system, it's about power and control, maintaining it, gaining or maintaining power and control. So for these men, and even including myself, to be in a position where I cannot predict who will be impacted by the virus, who will get it, who is safe from this. It's the same thing with systemic violence and systemic racism. I mean, you have an idea that is targeted to Black and brown people of color, but even within that, you don't know what day that's going to happen to you, who's going to be impacted by that, what hashtag is going to develop on any given day. So the sense of control around, will I have a job? Will I be able to eat? Will I keep my home? All of those things were anxiety-driven, but ultimately landed in this idea of control. I cannot control my surroundings and my environment. So that was the difficulty of asking that question. And this is something I wanted to do. I know we lost some time, but as we get into this conversation, and for many of you, and I want to ask why you were interested in this workshop. It's because a lot of times folks have been harmed by men, right? And sometimes you can get triggered by even the idea of spending time, energy, and resource on working with men when men have done harm to you. I think it's so critical and crucial that we include men in this conversation, because they're the ones that may have done harm, and men have done harm to other men as well. And men can also be harmed by women from their experiences growing up as children. So we're not saying that it's only directed men towards everyone else, but the idea that people are hurt, and if they're not getting the help and the healing that they needed, they tend to take that on other people. So I just want to walk through this, take a really quick breathing exercise, a break before we jump into the rest of the conversation. So just listen to my words, and you can do this sitting or standing, whatever works best for you. Ground your feet, shoulder width apart, connecting your toes like roots to the sacred ground beneath you. You are a tree. And only if you feel comfortable, close your eyes while we do this. If you're able to, if you're able-bodied, stretch and shake your arms and legs. Stretch out, shake your fingers if that's what you can do. If not, just imagine that you are a tree standing strong and resilient as a soothing, cool summer breeze flows through the branches and leaves of the baobab tree or your favorite tree. Think for a moment, where does your mind, body, and soul need a healing, medicinal, refreshing, restorative breath of fresh air? Where is it needed in your body? Is it your heart? Is it your lungs? Is it your limbs? Is it your feet? Is it your thighs? Where does it need it? Where does your spirit need it? Where does your soul need this? Is it your brain? Is it the overwhelming issues of the day? So just think about that as we jump into taking these 3 deep breaths. And I want you to take 3 breaths, breathe in all that is positive, breathe out all that is negative, that's toxic and not useful. Take a deep breath and hold it. Guide it to that place in your mind that is needing to be lifted, cleared, and closed. And then when you breathe out all the toxins, the negative energy, the negative thoughts that only hold you back and weighs you down. And when you take the second breath, breathe again, guiding that fresh breath of air through your veins like a cleansing, medicinal raindrop that splashes fresh water on the parts of your body that need healing, a jolt of energy, or needs to settle down. Let this drop of water slow you down, ground you further with the earth, extending your toes deeper into the soil, or to the soul. Again, breathing out all the toxins away from your body. Breathe away all that harms you and leaves you only with that splash of water that restores and repairs your body. With this last breath, breathe a blanket of oxygen. This third breath, breathe a blanket of oxygen that goes right to the part of your soul that needs soothing. This breath is like the chlorophyll generated from the sun that transforms trees and plants and allows it to create anything that they need that is lacking. That helps it, encourages it to flourish and grow. And let this last breath be the thing that allows your soul to sing in the harmony of your mind, body, soul, and spirit. Let this breath transform and allows you to breathe so we can all breathe and be healthy and well. You are a tree. So come out of that breath and then we'll jump right back into the conversation. And feel free to use this anytime you need throughout the conversation. And this is just a question for you to think about, right? Who is burdened the most in this moment? What is the potential harm being done in this moment, and to whom? And many people are impacted in this moment, some more than others. But I just want you to kind of think about for a moment who's impacted or burdened by this moment the most. Is it young people who are struggling with the idea of not being in school, being physical, being social with their classmates and their friends and their teachers and their counselors, who can't go outside? Is it survivors of violence? Not only are they survivors of systemic racism, but they're also survivors of sexual violence. They're also survivors of intimate partner violence. Or is it the men, right? Men who are being, their fatherhood, their manhood, their masculinity is being challenged every single day because of COVID, in this moment that we're in. Because the idea that, the things that, quote unquote, we're typically charged with doing and behaving and acting out because of our socialization around not working or not being able to pay the bills, and that quote unquote gender binary, that limiting gender binary around gender socialization. Everything that we've experienced is being, impacted by COVID-19 and of course systemic racism every single day. So the idea and the questions around working with men and being the cure, and it's a question to everyone actually, like reimagining who we are as people, as individuals, as people who are in relationship, who are with our families, who are in the communities, leaders, who are in the workplace. Every aspect of our life needs a reimagining. So the questions, I don't know if we have this as a question or a poll, but well, for the moment that we are in, and think about on the other side of COVID, whenever that may be, and I know it's not going to be a particular date or when we have this vaccine or whatever it may be, but on the other side of this, and hopefully we're taking agency and autonomy around how we're going to live and when we're going to go back, what we're going to go back to. So the questions I have for you are we living in this new normal? Is what we are in right now, the situation that we're on this call by Zoom rather in person, or the day-to-day struggles we've had over the last 6 months, is this the new normal? Or is this a transition to something else? Versus, are we returning back to the status quo? Do we want to go back to what we've come out of in terms of COVID? Is that something we really want to return to? Well, everyone was not treated fairly. This idea of the essential worker, we talk about. The essential worker was probably the most disrespected person outside of COVID. So we have to kind of look at that, and we have to challenge the way we treat people. Is that what we want to return to? The status quo? Is that what the goal has been for this? Or are we reimagining who we are as individuals, relationships, families, and leadership? And this has been the crux of the men's roundtables over the last several months. It's this reimagining who we are, our masculinity, our manhood, our fatherhood, our parenthood, who we are in relationships as, partners, as husbands, as, whatever type of relationship we may be, is who are we inside of that and how we communicate. I apologize for the noise. I'm in New York City, so you hear all the ambulances and the police. So the Connect Men's Roundtables are the place where we've really opened up this question about being the cure and looking at what that means. So each week, opposed to every month, come up with pretty much a topical theme or something that is needed, and we can tell this, and the men in the groups help define what this is. Each week, what topics that we're going to have. Like this week, tonight actually, we're going to be talking about masks, masculinity, and manhood in the Men's Roundtable. We've been really pushing the limits with talking about mind, body, soul, and spirit. Some of the men in the roundtable and some men in my work, maybe in your life, rarely have conversations about how we're doing mind, body, soul, and spirit. So we've emphasized that. We've even incorporated meditation practices into the Men's Roundtable. Week to week, having practitioners come in and do meditation, or mental health workers help us around, mental wellness and self-care issues. So that's been very, very important about this time. And that is also about men being the cure. If we're healthy, we think more healthy and we behave more healthy. So, and we've really been focusing on this idea of wholeness and wellness for men. A lot of times we don't talk about that, but that's important as well. And what also has been really powerful about the moment and being able to kind of address immediately is situations around systemic violence, police violence, and state violence. As it's happening, we've been able to be in a safe space with other men to really break down the things that are happening today and relating it to, what is a common thread with the Men's Roundtable is accountability, but also accountability with compassion. And, and we do challenge each other respectfully. Not everyone has the same ideology that comes into the Men's Roundtables, and that's fine. And that's what we also encourage. And the spaces are intergenerational. Typically, they're interracial as well. But our allies, our white allies, have really given us a space to meet on our own and deal with all the systemic oppression that's been impacted by Black and brown people. So we respect them for that. But this has been a space for men of color, primarily over the last 6 months, where we can talk about the issues around, I Can't Breathe, and the George Floyd case, all the cases as they come up, we're able to kind of address that 2 times a week and provide a space for men to talk about their feelings, events, before we jump into action. And we've had, Black Lives Matter folks join us. We had folks from Untitled Freedom who are doing work around the world join us in men's roundtable conversations to update us on what we can do from our COVID spaces at home, those of us who have gone out into the street, or those that have gone out to the street, and figure out ways that we can be interactive and engaging as well. So the roundtable has been so many different things for many different people. And this idea of maintaining peace in this moment, there's a real struggle because there's a lot of frustrations that folks are feeling, powerlessness that they're feeling, really being attacked and not really being in a position to be strategic and proactive rather than just being reactive and reactionary. So really exploring the ideas of how COVID crisis has changed how we are as men, challenging in a really good way and using it to challenge and debunk these stereotypical ideas of male socialization that are very harming and limiting to other people and even to ourselves, and challenging what fatherhood looks like in this moment. And then, we talked about hope, and some of you mentioned that, you're still feeling hopeful in this moment. Got a lot of pushback around this idea of hope, in these roundtables. Like, why are you even introducing the idea of hope when all of this is going on? And, for me, it was really about, thinking about this reimagining. Hope is that. Thinking about, liberation and what that looks like. That should be our guiding light in this moment, not just the overwhelming feelings of despair, anxiety, and this lack of control. So those need to be the things that we were talking about. And then we looked at, exploring manhood. It's the moment that we're in, the rites of passage that we've always been kind of indoctrinated into growing up as a teen, going into manhood. Is this the moment that we were prepared for? And one of the first questions we asked in these roundtable conversations was, were we prepared for this moment? What made us prepared and what made us unprepared for this moment? So that was a really interesting way to kind of start off this conversation. So again, fatherhood, manhood, masculinity under COVID-19 and systemic racism. And then after a while, like I mentioned, there was so many different topics that I could no longer come up with one topic or one or two or three intersecting issues. So we kind of left it open, and we've been calling the summer series the vent, where people just come and raise up whatever they need to. We'll make some connections between it, but really give people an idea to kind of vent how they're feeling in this time and in this moment. COVID-19, and we talked about men's health and wellness, particularly around COVID-19, because as many of you may have known, that COVID-19 impacts Black and brown folks more than any other type of people. And it's also within the Black and brown communities, it's impacted men more than any other group, which we found very interesting. And we kind of broke that down to what is it about COVID-19 and systemic racism that creates and generates disparities in health and economics and other things, but health in terms of health disparities. If you receive COVID-19, you're more likely to have difficulties or even lead to death because of health disparities. So we had some really deep conversations about what does it mean, and this is around gender and health disparities, and then also looking at issues around birthing and health justice issues for women and motherhood. So we're having real deep conversations about that, but also connecting how systemic racism is connected to that as well. And not to kind of say that we need to eat more healthy and be healthy and eat right, but to really kind of look at some of these root causes that really have shown its head, during these times. I just wanted to kind of to frame some of the experiences about working with men differently through these men roundtable conversations, through some of the comments that from some of the members. And one particular member you may know to some capacity is Byron Hurd. He's a violence activist, an educator, and he's a filmmaker. And you might know some of his films, Beyond Beats and Rhymes. He's working on a film right now called Hazing. Also Soul Food Junkies. And, Byron is one that does this work for many, many years, probably close to 20 years now. engaging, men and boys and having conversations about violence prevention. So he said this, leading another amazing virtual men's roundtable for Black men to express our feelings as we experience this global pandemic, not to really focus in on our thoughts and feelings, not necessarily what we need to do. And framing these conversations in a way that look to tap into the emotions and not to intellectual, because many of us are armchair revolutionaries, but we don't really practice in a way that we can, tap into our emotions when we're doing this work. So, and looking at this is the path toward healthy manhood. He's very grateful to be in these rooms with brothers like, Juan Ramos, who does this work as well here in New York City, and brothers like Kevin Powell, who are also involved in this work from many capacities, as those who have done harm and those who are work with people that are engaging people to interrupt cycles of violence. So it's really, and I appreciate Byron for really putting this post out on social media. And he also says that it's helpful for all of us. And I could say he speaks to himself about listening to other Black men who are at various stages of emotional development, and I would say even consciousness, who are battling a variety of personal issues that they want to overcome. And that's the reality. We're not just dealing with intimate partner violence in our lives, intimate personal violence, even systemic racism, or even, the virus of COVID-19. We're dealing with so many other things as well that we're being distracted from in this moment. But the round table is providing a space for us to kind of really get into some of the issues that we're facing and experiences as Black men as a collective. So he speaks to the love he has for Black men, Black women, LGBTQ folks, and GNC folks as well. And I think this piece here is really, really important. Speaks to, the political climate that we're in. The idea that he wishes that we can finally put aside petty social political differences to form like Voltron, to come together to defeat Donald Trump during his elections. And you can have any varying opinion you want about the elections and who to vote for, but the reality is that harm is being done. And Byron speaks to that point. He hates with a passion that folks are being mistreated, demeaned, harmed in any way by this power structure. So I think that's important to kind of address. And, men in the roundtable are able to express that as well in these spaces. And these are just some of the topics that we've talked about, either virtually or in person. The idea of looking at undoing R. Kelly culture, not necessarily R. Kelly, but the culture that created someone like that to thrive and be harmful to girls, and the idea of men and women working in peace together, transforming our notions of manhood and brotherhood and what community looks like, and also talking about forgiveness. I mean, this is we spent a lot of time talking about forgiveness, and a lot of it was like forgiving others for the harm they've done to us, but more importantly, being really self-reflective about the harm that we've done to other people and ourselves. And that's where the accountability piece comes in. And looking at reparations, the idea of reparations, which came up, I believe, in South Carolina or North Carolina, that spoke to the idea of reparations. So we spent a lot of time on that, about this idea of repair from racism, transatlantic slave trade, to building this country and just being not considered a full citizen and being disrespected by governments and what have you. So and also talking about the indigenous people to the land of North America, what happened to them, and they should be included in this idea of reparations as well, and folks from the Caribbean into the continent of Africa, because human resource and resources were taken from that land. So reparations are a huge conversation, and the idea of those of us who are men that have done harm to women and girls, that we should be involved in some level of repair to them for the harm that we've done and inflicted. And that's why, we run these roundtables, not necessarily restorative, transformative justice style, but definitely influenced by that. So that the topics and conversations about how do we repair and what accountability looks like from a community aspect, and how do we keep what is safety and reducing harm for people. Those are all the kind of threads of our conversations. So speaking to Byron one last time, is to really kind of talk about, men in these round tables really being emotional, crying sometimes. And I don't highlight that because that's a big thing, because that is a natural thing that we should be doing. But to speak to brothers who are on the call, really expressing their feelings about the current social and political climate, and they were thoughtful in their comments. The vast majority of brothers talked about the need for us to stand in support for Kamala Harris. And I say this, it's not that Kamala Harris is perfect, and we may all have our different views about her, but the idea that a Black woman is being held to the task more than any other type of person. And one feeling that I've had about Kamala Harris is that we saw how much attack that Barack Obama received as a Black male running for high office. Imagine with gender and racism as an intersection that what Kamala Harris is going to be receiving, and she has. So Byron goes on to say, talking about the need for us to stand up for Black women in general, stop with the misogynoir, which is a hatred of Black women in particular, that we engage in publicly and privately. And he wanted to let sisters know, because I get this all the time as we come up with these great and creative topics. It's like, what are we saying to men? What are we talking about with men? How are we truly transforming what they're doing? And that speaks to the cure again, that he wanted them to know that, I want you to know that Black men are out here, are interrogating misogynoir, challenging our brothers and sisters to stop attacking Black and brown women, especially women, when so many Black and brown women are risking their lives and freedom on the front lines, advocating on behalf of Black men, in addition to Black women. And I wanted to use this testimony because the thing that we've talked about many a time in the men's roundtable is that we don't function and exist on our own. I'll probably get more women that sign up for the men's roundtable than men do, right? But they are putting their faith in us that we are challenging each other around ideas around women and Black women and women of color in these spaces, and challenging our misogyny, our privilege, and our male expectation and entitlements in a way that represents them well, without them having to do the work. And we are definitely guided by them, of course. But to speak to the point that we are talking about accountability, we are challenging each other in our behavior and our language towards women of color, Black women in particular in this case. So just to kind of let them know that this is what's happening in these spaces. We're not just kind of going with the flow and patting each other on the back and in agreement with harmful language and behavior and attitudes towards women and Black women in particular, and Latino women in particular. So just kind of, I love that point, emphasizing that. And this is Emmanuel, a member of the Roundtable. He's a teacher, English teacher in Brazil, who joined the Roundtable as well. So we have people from Brazil and other parts of the world and throughout the country that join the Roundtables as well. And this is he's an English teacher. And Brazil is really, I loved having Brazil on the call because they were going through a parallel process that we were going through here in North America around the virus, systemic racism and violence and colorism. And, many communities in Brazil are poor and impacted by health disparities, just as they are here in the United States. So it's great having someone from Brazil going through a parallel process and experiencing COVID in terms of the number of infection and fatalities right behind the U.S. was during this time. So let's hear from him around his piece around fatherhood and struggles he's had engaging his children and being in a new married relationship, but with his ex-wife, the struggles around that and the separation because of COVID. Here's Emmanuel.
Greetings, my name is Emmanuel. I'm talking from Brazil. Q is my mentor. I live here in Recife, northeast of our country. And I'd like to share a little bit about me. I am 42 years old, and I am a father. And the fatherhood is the most important thing that has happened to me in my life. I'm a teacher, and the best title I have is being a father. This is the thing that has happened to me, and I love it. I love to be a father. And these roundtables have helped me to be a better man. How? I'm divorced, and I was facing a lot of problems to communicate with my kids due to the COVID-19. And the self-distancing and all those things we were trying to communicate, and it was very hard. And I was feeling very sad and a difficult time. And also I had some problem issues with my ex-wife, and it was something hard to deal with. And then talking to Q and the round table and sharing how I was feeling in a safe place. It's very important to have a safe place. I discovered that a communication would be possible. And what I did, I started facing and challenging myself to talk to my kids every day. So I bought a cell phone. At first it seemed to be quite simple, but you know how your mind's going to work, and when you have someone helping you out, we got a man in a round table sharing their own experiences, it made me feel more safe and more empowered to go and talk to my ex-wife and try to have kind of a communication with my kids. And then I discovered things are possible. I don't even believe I'm saying that, but I'm saying that when you feel your fatherhood, you understand that it's okay to be not okay. But it's not okay to keep not okay. We got to look for someone to help you out in a fair, frank conversation and share how you feel. So this mentorship and these round tables, they've helped me a lot. And every day I keep thinking, what can I do better to my kids? And when I communicate and I say, I love you, I miss you, never forget, your dad is here. And that's what we do in our roundtables. So I'd like to thank you, Brother Q, for your great job and for teaching us things, and we are learning from each other, because these roundtables is an opportunity to share. There is no judgment. There is no right or wrong. There is you. You share who you are and what you've been learning. And I'd like to say you one thing. We never know when it's going to be our end, when things will finish. So we have to use all the opportunities to share how you feel. And fatherhood is one of the most important things we can have in life. Anna, I'd like to say one thing. I was really reflexive about. It's about our families and what has just happened a couple of days, 3 days ago. Our family in Wakanda, and I would say our family, Wakanda's family forever. Your fatherhood is forever.
So that was Emmanuel. As you can see, he's definitely a father. He's been through his struggles, and he's really been open to joining us from Brazil and talk about fatherhood in a way that I think he's never, really imagined could be discussed, because we challenge each other. And the men in the room, most of fathers, some have had tough experiences with their own fathers growing up. So people are honest about that and really examining the way and reimagining the way that we can be better and healthier fathers. And not just about being a father as an individual, but really tapping into parenthood with a child's mother, even if they're not even in a relationship together. So he's an example of that. They're really challenging the way we can truly, truly be different And, in these things, I think they impact overall how we are in relationship and encounters. It really is a reduction in violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, and other forms of violence. When we are healthier and more engaged and see ourselves in partners and allies with women and with youth in all these different ways. So this is another question. I don't know if we have this as a Q&A question, but a question I want you all to kind of think about. I know we're losing our time, but I want to kind of just rush with this and have you think about, what is needed to be different on the other side of this moment. And I really encourage you all to use this as an opportunity, as a practice, right? You don't need to have all the answers, but be in a practice of being different individuals, men, women, mothers, fathers, partners, father figures, parents by community, whatever it may be, to be really different on the other side of this moment. And what will it take to reach that? And what is this kind of liberation will look like, feel like, smell like? And then when we achieve that, the work that needs to be done, in my opinion, is creating justice. Because when injustice is done, particularly by systems, trauma is created. And a sense of anxiety that kind of goes down from generations to generations. And we need to stop passing that down and also pass down the ability that we can heal and be resilient to generations as well, because we have everything that we need. But just what will it look like on the other side of this work? And just another piece on fatherhood and being different and reimagining. There's another young father named Kier, and he speaks on his vlog about fatherhood. I just wanted to share this with you all as well.
A lot of young men, particularly young black men, hit me up being like, yo, I can't wait to be a dad. I can't wait to be a father. And I love that because I think the men that were a generation before us got raised by the men that were a generation before them. And those men didn't really know warm love because a man didn't express those things that way back then. And I feel like I owe those young men to tell them, like, bro, this is hard. Because it exposes things about you that you don't know about yourself. It exposes all of your insecurities. And it's a huge emotional undertaking if you do it the right way. So while you see me and Noemi hugged up and loved up on each other, and we got this cute vlog and we make these cute videos and cute pictures, it's because we put in an immense amount of work to make this thing happen, man. We do it every day. We be having sit-down vlogs and we be on the cusp of beefing with each other. But we find that one thing in common that just always brings us back to remembering why we're together. So, bro, when you see this and me playing with my baby and it looks really cool and you want to have those moments, just know that that's the upside. It comes with a downside and it can be incredibly painful if you allow it to be. So before you take on a family, bro, go see somebody about your past and go see somebody about the trauma that you've endured throughout the course of your life and start healing. Because if you don't heal from that, you'll have all this and you'll never be happy. And I don't want that for nobody, especially anybody. A lot of young men, particularly young black men.
Okay, so I think that's self-explanatory. It speaks to the generational gap around manhood and socialization and fatherhood. That there was something missing. I'm part of that generation that we didn't pass down that was healthy. We weren't great models or examples to the next generation. I think using this time in this moment under COVID, under systemic racism, to kind of be different in how we communicate and how we ally with younger people, how we ally with girls, how we ally with women in our lives, how we ally with the unusual suspects that we typically don't, how we ally with our white allies, how we ally with trans folks, how we ally with other people in our communities that we typically don't come together with and learn from and take leadership from. So I think that's very, very important. These are some of the roundtables, topics, and conversations. This will be all available to you in the download of the slides today. Really looking at how Black men and boys are targeted. And even in that conversation, we looked at how women of color, Black, Latino girls are targeted by these systems as well. They don't get the same amount of attention that we do as Black men or males. And that there's a level of unconditionality that women of color have about being on the front lines, no matter who's being harmed in that situation. And that we as men are really conditional. It has to be the right scenario, the right environment for us to be involved. And we need to stop that and really stand up for our male, for our counterparts and women, youth, LGBTQ, GMC folks. We need to kind of really be unconditional in our nature. So we looked at accountability all the time, what accountability is, the acknowledgement of what we've done, the acknowledgement that there's consequences to our actions, whatever they may be, and also that we need to be in the process of changing the way our thought processes about how we view women and girls, how we view other men. All those things are important. So the thing about accountability with compassion is key. And masculinity is like the crux of it. We're always challenging and unpacking masculinity. And what we know today is the most popular term for it now is toxic masculinity. But I encourage you all to kind of look at masculinity differently. Yes, many parts of masculinity, probably most of it, is unhealthy, particularly to other people and to women. But this idea of masculinity not only being about manliness and manhood, but that it's a social construct that men and women, no matter how you identify, can take on as well. Right? It's not limited to just male, female gender. And that is an attitude, it's a mask that we put on depending on the moment. And I encourage you all to kind of look at masculinity totally differently through this exercise. We're going to do it really quickly. These are some images of toxic or super or different forms of masculinity that are in society today. It has to do with prowess, physical prowess. It has to do about anger, unresolved trauma, gun violence, how systemic violence treats Black people who are Black, brown in their communities. And other examples of manhood, masculinity. And these are pictures taken by Jamel Sabaz, the famous documentarian out here in New York about Brooklyn and Harlem, the 70s, 80s, 90s up till today. And how, indigenous folks and other people of color are always associated with guns and war, military. But this is what I want to do really quickly, and we only have about 7 minutes left, is this conversation about masculinity, I think, is very, very important, is at the crux of a lot of violence and peace and health and healthy relationships that we have today in communities and our personal lives. And this is a scale of masculinity, a range of masculinity that I created to be part of this conversation. And this is, I don't know if we have this as a poll question. If we do, we can put it up now, please. But if not, I want you to think about on a scale of masculinity, and it's really masculinities. Right? Masculinity is really broad and has a many range of different definitions and expressions. So I want you to think about where you fall in this scale. For me, for instance, I say I would fall somewhere in the middle, either right or left of the middle, depending on what's going on in my life. Right, and sometimes I push over into hyper or toxic masculinity, or I can be more towards the feminine in terms of being my true self, where it's most safe. That's where I am. But I think I generally range in terms of the middle. And this is, I want you all to answer for yourselves and think about where do you fall in this level of masculinity. Again, moving beyond masculinity being about being a male, that anyone can take on masculinity and do all the time. So I want you to think about where you fall in the scale. And the other most important piece is what's really important when we think about systemic racism, how people perceive you, your level of masculinity when you're out and about in the world, right? And this really falls into where people are racist, sexist, classist in terms of how they perceive people, right? So think about where you fall on the scale and how people see you on the scale. And then typically when I do this exercise, this is where people kind of land. Most men see themselves in the middle. Most women see themselves somewhere between middle masculinity and feminine. And a lot of that has to do with, again, how we're socialized, how we perceive ourselves. And then when we think about these ranges, right, when we think about hyper-toxic masculinity, this is where I really want you to challenge yourselves and how you approach people about masculinity. Sometimes when it is unsafe or harmful, people fall into toxic masculinity. I had a client who was worried about gang culture in his neighborhood and would always have to negotiate not joining a gang. And it got to a point where he had to join a gang to protect himself from the gang that was recruiting him. So just thinking about toxic masculinity, masculinities as a defense sometimes that people have to go through in order to just get through the day. It's not where they are all the time because we are fluid people. Depending on the top part of the day, we end up on one part of the scale. Where we are safe, we can be our most feminine, right? We're at home, we're safe in the home. But if it's unsafe at home, we can move towards the middle or the hyper in terms of protecting our loved ones who are being harmed, who are being abused, either sexually, physically, or emotionally. Sometimes we become toxic in the defense of our own lives or other people that we love and we share. So I know it's a hard concept to really break down, but I want you to think about challenging yourself to think about how hyper and toxic masculinity takes shape and form, and use these things as an entry point into having conversations with men and with youth, meeting them at their masculinity and breaking that down and unpacking why they're thinking that way. How can we negotiate with them? How can we strategize with them to be more around the middle or more towards the feminine and how they approach life and situations? And when we think about masculinity, we always have to ask the questions about Black masculinity or Latino masculinity, machismo, or whatever ethnic group you belong to in masculinity, and how that shows up against white masculinity. Talking about white power, white supremacy, male supremacy, these things work together, right? And what are the pros and cons when you have these conversations? So these are things that come up all the time in the men's roundtable, and this is what we do to kind of really help reimagine where we can be on the other side of this. And collusion is a big piece. Don't collude with unhealthy masculinities or behavior. And once you do that, we lose the idea of transforming people, or it takes more time to help transform. This Connect's mission, you can go to our website, learn more about that. And our work with men is a strategy. You know, most of our work is with women and girls, but we spend a lot of time and energy thinking of men and women as allies and co-conspirators of transforming the cultural violence in our communities. All the different places where we do our men's work, schools, universities, communities, churches, faith institutions, what have you. And I want you all a plug to, we do our Father's Day pledge against violence every year. I want you all to go online and sign the Father's Day pledge at fathersdaypledge.org. This year, because of COVID, we weren't able to meet in person. And this is done in 55 cities now in 3 countries. And we all started out here in New York City through Connect and a relationship with City Council of New York. I know we're over time, but if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll try to answer them either right now or through connecting with me by email. The website for the Father's Day Pledge is, you'll get all of this in the slides. It's fathersdaypledge.org.
Q, we do have quite a few questions that folks have posed, and they're wonderful questions. We'd love to be able to hear your thoughts on this, but the hosts on the back end actually have to head over to another session. Otherwise, we'd go ahead and end a little bit later. But I wonder if you could share your email with folks and then they could reach out to you, or how would you like to go about that?
Yep. You can reach out to me by email, qwalcott@connectnyc.org. It's part of these slides. First page. Any other questions real quick while I do this? I appreciate you all listening and being part of this conversation. It's just the beginning. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and we can continue this conversation or even create some of these roundtables and spaces where you are in your part of the country. Because I find it's a really effective way. It's really the informal space where we can get deeper, and it's not clinical. It's not, a formalized discussion, and we're able to kind of reach more people. And because of the situation through working virtually now, we're able to expand our networks. And please join the Men's Roundtable. We have one tonight. Again, email me and I'll get you the information. If you have any men or young people that are interested in joining the Men's Roundtable. And we also have community dialogues where men and women come together. And also, we're going to be doing intergenerational conversations as well. Follow us, keep in contact with me. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to answer your questions, but I promise if you reach out to me, I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Q. We are so excited to be able to host you here today. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We hope to see folks in our next NSAC session. And fingers crossed, we will be seeing you in early August next year in 2021 in Anaheim in person. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Q.
Thank you.
Thank you.